What is up, everybody? I am here with Michael Fisher from Codify, who works with some of the top pitchers in the game, and we're going to go over some of the rule changes and how you might expect it to change, some of the stats you've seen, and just the overall impact of on the game. One thing before we get into this, please remember, hit that subscribe button. All this information is for free. The only charge is hitting subscribe. So do that. And without further ado, here we go. I'm going to start with one rule that may be underrated, and I don't think many people have discussed, before the season. But pitcher PitchCom to me is a lot of fun, but I also think it impacts the pace of the game and may impact certain pitchers over other pitchers. But the ability of pitchers to call their own pitches versus waiting on the catcher. What have you seen so far?
I think we've seen a fraction of what we will see. I do believe we're in spring mode. You're an established pitcher. You have 5 pitches. Guy put down punched curveball. You threw a curveball. I'm going to execute a good curveball and move on. Now we're into April and May, and I'm starting to give up home runs on the pitches you're calling, and I'm losing a little confidence, and that comes into play. You're going to see more and more pitchers as we get into this using PitchCom. Because if you have 4 or 5 pitches, there's just not time to disagree and get the guy to call what you want. And now you don't have conviction when you threw your pitch, and now you're screwed.
Totally agree. And I talked to Bassett about this, and he said, Chris Bassett said 99% of the time he knows what pitch he wants to throw.
Right.
So it's just basically a catcher making a suggestion, but I know what I'm going to do. And that's why he was shaking off a bunch last year, like playing guess what pitch I'm thinking of. Now he has the ability to not only get that in right away to make sure there's no pitch clock violations, but also dictate the pace of the game. And I saw like Scherzer do a lot of that, or Greinke do some of that, and even messing around with shaking off himself. So maybe more established pitchers, this might help. And also I'm thinking guys that work with your intelligence, pitch intelligence, clearly know what they want to throw. They have the charts. Have your guys said anything about that?
Absolutely. Like I say, there was time to influence your pitch mix with a couple of shakes, but just like you said with Bassett, there are guys I work with that have the conviction ahead of time. I mean, the ball's not even in their hand yet from the catcher, guys. Now I'm going to throw a slider, and you're just sitting there waiting for this guy to get on the same page. Some guys have that sync and trust their catcher. God bless them. You know, if that gives you the conviction, that's fine, because you have the intel to throw the pitch that you have conviction in. It might not be the right pitch from my perspective, but I'll show you where to throw it, and it's okay. Conviction gets you a lot of the way there. But that's not the case with an awful lot of guys. And there's going to be, like I said, there's going to be more and more guys knocking on my door too, of like, hey, I've never had to do this before, and the damn clock is ticking, and I wanted to rub up this baseball I just got from the ump, but I don't have time. I don't get time for that. And I want to scratch myself, and I want to, sorry, the clock's ticking. You have to decide and go. And you're going to have to do a shitload of homework ahead of time if you want to succeed.
Yep. That's kind of where I was going with that, is I think it may actually increase the demand. Well, number one, increase pitchers kind of paying a little more attention on the scouting reports versus relying on their catchers for some guys. Some guys like Chris Sale, I know famously doesn't ever shake. And it's like, my stuff's good enough. I'm going to throw whatever you tell me to throw, and we're cool. But other guys may want to do a little more research on scouting reports, a little deeper, if they're going to be tasked with calling stuff. So yeah, that was kind of my feeling on it too.
Yeah, there are a couple guys who are just like, I don't have the bandwidth. I know I don't have the bandwidth. So I'm going to put my effort into studying the maps. And when the guy calls a certain pitch, knowing when I use this pitch, where to attack. And that's a lot. That's a lot. But obviously, if you or I were out there, we'd be calling our own pitches.
Yes. My pitches wouldn't be very good, though. They'd go a yard on me. Yeah. So next we'll touch on, and this leads into the pitch clock. Everybody's familiar with the pitch clock by now, and some of the outliers you've seen about violations, either from hitters or pitchers. It's almost, yeah, I mean, it's not fair to say this is impacting pitchers the most, actually. I think hitters, it's a pretty severe change. And baseball's tempered some of these rules a tiny bit recently with their new memo. Just like if you brush back take a big hack. Catcher is up at bat next, to start off
Mm.
an inning. We're going to grant a little bit more time, which makes total sense. But what have you seen with the pitch clock so far? And I know I've noticed one thing, and we've talked about this, but violations, they started out decently high, and they basically have themselves throughout spring training.
Yeah, they're in line with what happened in the minors. What happened there was in a season where it mattered. This is spring. They care a little less. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but we're still seeing automatic strike threes every day, at least one, almost every day. And I don't know. There's still everyone's familiar with the pitch clock rules, but who's really familiar? I mean, how many thousand tweets do we see every day of like, he was in the box, like he was not alert to the pitcher. There's arguments about what does with 8 seconds mean? 8 seconds left mean? Does it mean when it ticks to 8, when it ticks to 7? I mean, there's huge arguments about that. The umpires have done a pretty good job of holding to what they're supposed to do. But there's been variance in the operators who are not the umpires running the clock. You see the guy get the ball back and the clock's not on. And it waits 4 seconds, then it goes. And other guys are like, I'm going to reset the son of a bitch right when you have the clock, like they're supposed to. That's a huge difference. So I wonder what you're going to see park to park, operator to operator. It's a big deal. It's a lot of extra time in some cases.
It's a big deal. And I wonder, I mean, are they reviewing pitch clock operators? Is MLB going to sit there and go, you kind of suck at your job?
No, we're going to review bat boys and bat girls.
I saw that.
For performance, but we won't review the clock operators. I hope they do. I'm not sure if they will or not. It seems easily reviewable.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've noticed is some pitchers weaponizing it, weaponizing the pitch clock, either staying set like Max Scherzer did and putting a lot of pressure on the hitter, like, hey, you're going to have to be in the box and ready to go, and I'm going to shove it down your throat the second you are, keeping hitters off balance. And I think there's going to be more of that. Like, that was another thing that jumped out at me when I talked to Bassett. He's like, yeah, some guys are trying out their stuff. Like Max is trying to explore the space and see how much he can get away with in spring training. Other people haven't done that yet. And there are some other tricks that we haven't seen yet that he wouldn't even tell me that he said, watch, it's going to be like, there's no defense to this stuff. So it might be really interesting.
I'll admit I was and continue to be surprised at the cases where the pitcher has the ball 4-3, steps off, 2-1-0, violation on the pitcher. Like, he stepped off. Like, that's not good enough. That doesn't stop the clock. You can ask for time, you can get time, but you can do jumping jacks, and that's where you'll see it abused. Is the batters are still distracted when they're like, I need to get in the box to get ready. And the pitcher's walking around and playing, doing these different things. It doesn't matter. The clock's ticking. Get your ass in the box and get ready. It doesn't matter. And that's a great way to distract some of the hitters. They're still distracted. Who was it? Was it Wandy Peralta, I think?
Oh, the strikeout in 2 seconds. Yeah.
Right. Or Severino, even, who like dance around, walk around the back of the mound, 8, 7, 6, jump on the rubber and throw it. It's like, it's within the confines. So, I mean, if you can do it, God bless you. But I mean, that's horrible for a hitter to have to deal with. So
it is.
There are ways
break
to
out my
weaponize
world's
it.
tiniest violin for the hitters, but
yeah, boo-hoo.
yeah, but no, you're right. And I think I know some folks are like, oh, don't weaponize the pitch clock, but you're paid, in Max's case, $40 million a year. If you're not using every single rule to your advantage, you're not helping your team the best you can. You're not earning your money. Like, I respect a dude who takes advantage of these rules as much as you can, push it.
Right.
And obviously you don't want to go over the line.
100% agree. 100%. There's been a lot of outrage from fans. You're ruining the game, this and that, or how come they can't pitch it when the batter's not ready? Like, we don't need someone killed over this. The batter has to be ready. They will never change that, and they never should change that.
Oh, 100%. Like,
stop saying it.
Right. Yeah. But at 8 seconds, once the hitter looks up, almost by rule, I know they're still fine tuning some of this, but almost by rule, you have to be alert and ready. That's the definition of a quick pitch, is pitching before a hitter is ready, and the hitter has to be ready at the 8 second mark, or else.
Yeah. It's interesting how it's written because, I mean, technically, I don't even explain it to the lawyer, but it says be ready at the 8-second mark. It doesn't say continue to remain ready. So
I guess that's true. They
it
probably
doesn't
could write.
say it. So, well, it's interesting because I have seen some kind of wandering after that they haven't called. I think perhaps some umpires, if not most, are going to interpret it as you were ready at 8 seconds.
Now, one thing I know that we all hate is the strikeout with, I mean, it's really the strikeout without throwing a pitch sucks. Like, even as a pitching guy, it's anticlimactic. It makes the game kind of silly. I had proposed that if a hitter has a timeout left, they should just automatically grant that timeout rather than give him a violation in that situation, because he
Yes.
would have. It's not, this isn't meant for as a trap for the unwary. It should be meant to speed up the game. And you, if you had a timeout left
Right.
and you didn't quite see the clock, just grant him the timeout. He has one fewer time. But
Agreed.
hopefully they come around on that, because I think that just destroys it. It detracts from the beauty of the game, and from a losing your at bat is a pretty big penalty for a violation.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about the K-struts after
I
the
know.
automated strikes. We saw Ryan Thompson exulting as if he won a playoff game, which was funny.
And Manoah
Yes.
did one of these, like, ring up things on a violation too, but ended up not being a violation because the hitter had asked for time that nobody saw, and blah blah blah. But lots of things to be worked out. In general, these rules are working really well as far as speeding up the game. That is one of the things that I think will make fans pissed off throughout the year. If there's any Ks on a pitch clock violation, strikes okay, a K, that's significant, and fans will lose their mind for a rig, especially a walk-off one. That's just terrible. But game times are down, what, like 25 minutes so far, somewhere in that neighborhood?
Yeah, it's a little less than that, but close to it. Yeah, it's a lot of time.
It is a lot of time. And one of the things that positive benefits, not only to moving the game along, and it makes me have to work quicker because obviously
I imagine.
yeah, it's a little tougher on me, but I'm not going to whine about it, because the benefits it has are, number one, shortening games and maybe allowing more people to watch, East Coast guys to watch West Coast games. Like we've talked about my issue. I can't stay up till 1 a.m. every day during the week and then still have time to do stuff in the mornings. I usually catch up the next morning. This might give me a little time to go deeper into games, and fans to maybe see some of the players they've missed on the West Coast and catch a couple more innings of the game.
Yeah, all my West Coast clients have been outraged at the lack of coverage by Pitching Ninja relative to their East Coast partners. So that's good news.
They've definitely got a point, because I kind of like, there's only so much one man can do, Fisher, only so much. The shift, what have you seen with the shift? I know it was, to me, what I've seen, at least visually, it's a better game. I know I appreciate analytics more than almost anybody, but there were certain hits that should be hits that you knew were a hit your whole entire life, and they weren't hits with the shift. They hit it right at somebody that's positioned in, X spot. What have you seen with that? I haven't seen too many complaints about doing away with the shift from anybody.
No, I mean, obviously cosmetically. I mean, I was raised when if you ripped a ball at 105 miles an hour past the pitcher, you batted 990 on those and it went into center field. And I mean, you're hitting 700 on those the last couple of years. So I can certainly empathize with all of that. There's certainly the little guy in me that says, so hit the damn ball the other way. There are times when I'm in that mood. But that aside, the shift has been restricted, not destroyed, but limited. We've seen things in spring. The batting average on balls and plays for lefties is up 15 points, which is not nothing. It's hard to say what's going to happen. I don't think, I strongly believe that you have not seen what you'll see teams do to fiddle around with this thing. We saw, I think, one at bat where they brought the outfielder in for Gallo. You might see a little of that. That's awfully high risk. I don't know if you remember the video or picture, but there was a lot of green out there.
Yeah, two guys that cover the entire outfield. It's kind of rough.
and they were shifted over. There was nobody in left field, and it's like, oh man, that's just. I mean, when is that going to be worth it? I don't know
Although
if you
with
know. There's
Gallo, a lot of times you can just have no fielders, and it's either going to be a home run or a strikeout.
This is true. This is true. I don't know if you know this, but running starts aren't allowed. So, because I was picturing that when I first heard the rule, I'm like, okay, it's going to be a track meet. They're going to, you know, guys aren't going to be able to play as much, but they're going to want certain teams are going to want their guys running around. You can't do that. You can't switch positions.
I
You
did
can
see
switch. You can switch your short and third, and you can switch your second and first, but you can't switch sides during an inning. So they've really limited more than just at first look. They've really limited things, and I mean, I don't see how we're not going to see an increase on balls, batting average on balls in play for left-handed hitters when there's a runner on first.
I honestly hope so.
How are you
Even
not?
as a pitching guy, I hope we do, because I think it got a little bit
Right.
unfair, but also just optically wrong. Like when you see a ball hammered, it should be a hit, and
Right.
fans are like, get the geeks out of the game. Like, geeks are part of the game. Getting analytics guys helps the athlete be better, but this also helps show a little more athleticism, cover more ground for fielders, see great plays, hopefully. And I respect baseball for doing something. It's not, at first I was like, why are we doing this? Why are we legislating where fielders can play? But we do this in other sports. Like, there are rules in the NFL and the NBA on illegal defenses. We have rules on this in other sports. It's not the first sport to present these rules. So is there anything wrong with baseball making it optically better, and maybe, helping hitters out within reason is okay? Like, that's fine. I feel sorry for them sometimes too.
Right. They have to do something. It's going to get worse and worse. You're not financially penalized for strikeouts. You have 4 or 5 guys on that side of the field. That's where you hit it. You're going to start to try to elevate the ball, because you do get paid for home runs, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. The batting average is outrageously low. It's not a product that most people want to sit there and watch. We do have to think about that, even if we want to think we're purists and we want to see guys get rewarded and penalized for their direct skill. It's not good. It's not good to watch.
Yeah, and what does a purist mean? Like, a purist, if you're talking about a purist in terms of the sport when you were growing up, which I always hate, like, things change.
Yeah, there's no such thing.
Right, there's no such thing. But the sport when you were growing up didn't have these analytics to place guys and all that. So are we really, is it bringing back the beauty of the sport, or is it somehow destroying the currentness of the sport, the analytics nature of the sport? I think most fans, well, I can't say this, because I think there's like half the group of fans that love it because of athleticism, the tradition of the sport, whatever. And then there's a group of fans that love it because it's a very mathematical sport. It's, it's about averages and numbers and analytics and where the ball gets put in play. There's not a non-zero portion of that people love it because it's a math game. That's why fantasy baseball is big and other stuff. And that's what you do. Like, you're not figuring out, this is going to be 100% successful. These pitches are on average going to be better than other pitches. It doesn't mean another pitch won't work, or even a pitch that's not in the blue might get a hitter out, but on average, you want to do that.
When I was a kid, when I first started watching baseball, and one thing that really drew me to this game was the history of how long they'd played and how long it'd been 60 feet 6 inches and 90 degrees to that base and all the history, and how you could remember, this is when I was a kid, compare what Joe Blow did in 1910 to what Roger Maris did, all this stuff. I know better now. Like, baseball is constantly changing, whether they have rule changes or not. Everyone's constantly adapting to everybody else's adaptations. It's totally different. And yeah, everything Codify does, it's like, okay, it's a totally different universe now. What does that mean for my scouting reports? And no bash, but the team stuff has not adapted. It has not. To how should your pitching strategy change? Because now there's not a guy standing 200 feet away in short right field. And now ground balls to the right side with a runner on first are kind of dangerous.
I didn't even think about that aspect of it, that how many times you have to rerun your numbers, and teams have to do that too if they're creating pitch heat maps for their pitchers, because what might have worked last year might not work this year, changing the shift and other rules. And there may be different values. And one of the biggest rules changes we're going to touch on next, I think, is probably the biggest impact that maybe is talked about not nearly as much. But, I think you're right. Like, you would know more than anybody how much change this means and how you're going to have to rerun your maps, and what someone had last year may not work for them as well this year.
Right. Part of what I do is watch what the system's expecting versus what we see. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's what uncovers a lot of issues with the baseball, where like in 2019 or like there's something very different with this baseball. And then I think it was Trinan called me like the first time he got his hands on it. He's like, this feels different, it sounds different, it moves differently. And so what do? It's like you got to send maps to somebody in April 2019. You're like, yeah, sorry, Straley. That pitch that was gold that would get 300-foot fly balls are that now you're going to give up. Oh, and you're pitching in Baltimore before they move the wall in. Oh, shit. Yeah, we got to kind of rethink things. And that's happening for sure this year. I mean,
yeah. Does that make what you do more valuable? Like, to me, it does, because everybody's got to adjust and not rely on what made them successful. And you're either offloading some of this onto you or onto their teams or whatever they're doing. But you're a specialist in this stuff.
Right.
Just thinking about how much work, but also how much value that helps create is kind of cool.
Right. Imagine if, I mean, just pretend it doesn't matter and go about your business. Well, it matters. And how are you adjusting? I mean, you have to adjust, and it would be easy to adjust in an improper manner here. It's tough. This is, I mean, you want to call it rocket science. It is. I mean, it's most of what I do in the off season, trying to figure out how the hell to adjust to everything that's happening. So,
well, literally the baseball stuff is rocket science, because it involves the drag coefficient, other stuff that you're doing when you do rocket science. So, and I assume this stuff is iterative, that you're going to be seeing other changes that take place during the season and have to communicate it to your pitchers, and redo the maps again constantly. Like, it's going to be a work in progress for some time as pitchers experiment with stuff. Right.
Well, forever. I mean, eventually, jumping the gun here, but I mean, eventually we're going to have an automated zone.
Yep.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, there's still guys that are going to swing at pitches out of the zone, but what does that mean? And the ones that are taken that aren't in the zone aren't going to be strikes, and that's going to change everything. So what do you do? How much do you throw out from the past? I mean, things still matter, but how much do they matter? And it's going to be a fun off season for sure.
Yeah. And that leads me to the next topic, which is both the base size and the disengagement rules, limiting the amount of times you can throw over or step off, as well as making it, shortening the distance a tiny bit because the bases are bigger, but also creating a sense of more success as a hitter slides in or base runner slides in and is able to avoid a tag or has more real estate to slide to.
That's right.
It's a pretty substantial change. And we've seen something like over 60% more steals this spring training. And I also higher on base percentage and more walks. Does that mean that either, what I don't know is there's multiple impacts? Like, you have the pitch clock that may be speeding people up, and then maybe their command's off, or hitters are being more patient, or hitters being more patient because they want to get on base, because of what the value of a walk now is more. If steals are up 60+%, you're more likely to be on second base. And it's not only up, but caught stealings the percentage is down. So that's why steals are going to be up, is because people are going to take more and more chances as the values played out. What have you seen? And this also would impact maps, because a walk is a big deal now, a bigger deal, because it's more likely to be a double.
Right. No, the value of everything a pitcher does within the map system can change, and that definitely changes. The impact of a walk is definitely worse. We're seeing more walks, we're seeing more steals. The success rate is like almost 80%, which to me means, I mean, we'll see what happens when the games really start, but it won't stay at 80%. Teams are like, if we can run at 80%, we're going to run more.
That's right.
So it could get pretty crazy.
Yeah, you may see 100% more steals, and you may see guys that traditionally haven't stolen steal.
Yeah, Smoltz said that the other day, that everybody will double their steals. It's probably a little much, but
but it's not far from that. If it's already up 60%, you may see it go up 80%. That's close.
the success rate will not sit at 80% for sure. If teams can do that, they'll run more and more. So we'll see. The pitchers are distracted. You can disengage and throw over twice. You saw Acuna yesterday. They threw over a third time.
Yes.
That's not a steal, but you know, I wouldn't be too upset if they called that a steal.
Right.
Honestly.
I mean, he's done something to get his pound of flesh out of the pitcher and work his base. Right. I mean, yeah, who knows? Like that's
right.
But to me, this is where we're seeing statistically the biggest difference. Like I'm looking at the other stats. On base percentage is up 5%, but it's mostly because of walks being up. Because batting average is down a little bit.
His batting average is down, which is interesting.
Yeah, and fewer homers and stuff.
Way down.
Maybe because you're getting more value out of putting the ball in play because you likely can steal a base and work a walk and get your second base, or is there some other factor that's come into play? Maybe hitters are just worse off because of the pitch clock and better off because of the steals and the shift. I don't know.
Right. We had the WBC, so there were some good hitters that weren't around. I'm not going to say that's why it's down 19% from last year, but how much do we expect a rushed hitter to hit as many home runs? Not so sure. You think he'd be a little bit more defensive, a little flatter, a little less prep for a pitch, a little more defensive. I don't have trouble believing that. I can't prove it, but I would believe that.
Well, I don't have trouble believing also that you're getting rewarded more for balls in play, doing away, and for walks and grinding out at bats, that maybe you're less focused on the 1 or 0, a home run or or strikeout.
Right.
And you're looking for more other outcomes for your at bat that are going to bring value for the team. Teams know these numbers. Teams are going to work with them. If they see steal percentage going up, and they're going to take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
And this also adds some value to having a catcher with a quick pop time, a strong arm.
That's a great note. Will runners take bigger leadoffs? Yes or no?
I would assume so.
After the first disengagement.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you?
How about after the second one?
Why wouldn't you?
Right. Back picks by catchers are not limited in any way by this.
Yeah.
So I bet the farm we're going to see more back picks.
Yep.
And that's interesting.
More action. Like the ball gets away, and all of a sudden you got a runner on third, or guy gets picked. But we started, to me, this seems like the biggest impact of any rule change, and probably the pitch clock was the most talked about one, but this is the biggest impact of any. And you're going to see steals in fantasy leagues go up. The value of anybody with any speed, you may not, you're going to get caught stealing even less, I would assume. And you may just have total green lights for everybody, and it may be just a track meet.
Right. Do you see that Vogelbach Mets video?
Yeah.
Yes. He's never attempted to steal. This is strongly related to the pitch clock. I know we isolate it and say it's the pitch clock and it's a disengagement rule, but it's strongly related. You're the pitcher. You got 15 seconds. There's a guy over there. You already threw once. I mean, it's just a huge distraction. So that's part of it. Yes, the bases are 3 inches bigger square. That's 44% more base. Yeah, that's not nothing. That's a huge difference for so many things. It's like you said, close plays at second. You stole. Not only is it closer, but there's more base to grab and slide into. There's more base to defend against if you're trying to tag the guy. I mean, there's just so many things.
And how many times have we seen caught stealings because somebody slid off the bag,
came off the base?
Yeah, and now with with more surface area, with more room to get the base, probably see less of that, which should also increase steal percentage. So if you're looking at value, guys with any kind of speed, guys with mediocre speed may have more value to you too. But somebody, you may see. Could you see someone with 80 steals this year? Is that possible? You
could. That one guy in the A's, Ruiz, can't remember his first name, but he stole just a boatload in the minors, and you can't stop him.
Yeah.
He's not the biggest on base guy, but I mean, he's going to be on second base.
How many would Ricky Henderson have had? He would have
had. I was surprised he didn't come out of retirement.
Right. He could still do it right now. Like he would absolutely steal bases today.
He would run, whether he got caught or not. He'd be running all the time.
So one thing that we've hinted at, and is going to be coming sometime soon, is the automated strike zone.
Mhm.
And what impact do you see that having in what you do, in the game itself? Which system are we going to go with? Are we going to go with everything called? Are we going to go with you can challenge it and it'll show up on the scoreboard, which I kind of like. Like it's very quick.
It sounds
Um,
like that's what they'll do
yeah,
out of the gate. There are times, and unfortunately, it happens with more frequency at this part of my life than I want it to, where I feel like something's a big deal, and no one else really does. So I must
oh, I
not be
thought this was
getting
a whole
this.
ED talk that you were going into, which
Well, no,
happens
no,
in
that's
at
not.
your age, happens to.
That's not an issue. Uh, thank God. But
Everybody, there's
everybody's got
one
their thing,
takeaway from this.
right? As a side note on that, the only issue I've ever had, my wife sometimes wears pitching ninja shirts to bed, and there was an issue that night. Other than that,
Yeah,
because I was
that's
confused.
brutal.
I was
That's
very
brutal.
confused.
I'm confused too. Let's
I was
move on
confused.
very quickly.
Here's the thing that when this happens, you can rewind this and say, Fisher sounded crazy. He was out there yelling at the clouds. I continue to see a two-dimensional implementation, not a three-dimensional, that it will be a pane, a window pane, however you want to call it, but based on the batter's height, not just irrespective of the stance. Okay. That is humongous.
It's huge.
Juan Soto has a strike zone, effective strike zone, the way it's called, that is barely larger than Altuve's. Okay. Juan Soto walks a ton. That's part of it. Juan Soto is wildly gifted. I love Juan Soto, all that. But a lot of it is his stance, the way he swings. It's completely legitimate within the rules. What I keep hearing will change that. Cody Bellinger, right now, he has to defend all those high strikes that are really hard to hit when you're fully erect, if you will. He doesn't go down at all. Sorry. This is brought to you by, right. He's not going to, a judge will be impacted by this. Bryce Harper will be impacted by this. The guys on each end of the spectrum that either get down when they swing or don't will be impacted the way it's written. Now, will it change? Maybe, but it's hard to imagine them saying, okay, we're going to register your height for this automated system. So we're just going to look at how you swing. They can do that. Hell, they do it now. I mean, the StatCast stuff has the top and the bottom of the zone based on how they swing.
Which people all the time in my comments are like, oh, the strike zone's the same for everybody on these automated strike zones that you're seeing on screen. And it's not. It's adjusted. No. If you look at Aaron Judge's strike zone versus Altuve's strike zone, Judge's is significantly higher vertically. So that's not, we do this today. But yeah, I've seen the same thing. They take, I mean, and that is going to, that will be an issue. Does this help pitchers or does it help hitters, an automated strike zone?
Oh my gosh. I mean, like I say, some hitters will be screwed. An Aaron Judge who, he knows he's a special hitter because he's gotten to the point where he knows he can't do anything with that low pitch and he's learned to lay off it more. And those wouldn't be strikes anymore. Those ones, he keeps pulling his socks up to his chin to try to show, but it's like, no, the top of the shin isn't a strike. But it is for him a third of the time. It's like when that goes to zero, and how is that going to affect everything? And will pitchers even try to throw it there because they know he's not going to swing, and all kinds of things. A pitcher, I mean, it'd be interesting to
breaking balls that are insane that they're just trying to catch a portion of the plate. I know. Rich Hill told me that he can pound the upper part of the zone. Sorry, Dick Mountain pounding the upper part of the zone sounds just little.
Yeah. Well, we won't have a problem with sponsors on this one.
Yeah, exactly. But he said the high breaking ball will be an important factor for pitchers where you can start one way over a hitter's head, just catch the top of the zone with, or Bassett was like, I can catch the outside part of a zone with a slider that I drop down on and stuff. You're going to see a lot of crazy pitches that may not ever get called with a real umpire that do hit the automated strike zone.
Right. I still haven't seen any 3D implementations. So the whole bit of I caught the back of the plate is obviously a fairy tale. And I don't think the typical fan appreciates, the ball isn't going to move 6 inches in the last 6 inches of movement toward the catcher and all that stuff.
Exactly. The plate is only so big. The ball
Right.
is moving at most, say it's moving 20 inches on the way to the plate. That's 20 inches over 60 feet. That it's not going to move over, a foot and a half, a foot, and just barely catch
Mhm.
the zone. And and the catcher isn't sitting 20 feet behind the hitter. So when you see a catcher catch a ball and they go, well, it's not where he catches it, it's almost where he catches it. Like you may miss by an inch or two or a couple inches, something like that. But if a catcher catches a ball in the zone, it's more than likely catching some of the play.
Right. In the minors, they had widened the automated zone
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna be able to do that.
a couple times they said as a nod to, well, those are usually strikes the way it is, like, but that's not the rule. So I think they're going away from that this year. I think that's what I read, is they're coming back down to 17. I didn't really read if that means one seam of the baseball caught it versus
Technically,
the
that's the way
middle
the
of the
rules
ball.
read. The rule
Right,
reads any
right,
part of baseball hits any part of the zone. So I would assume that unless they're
right,
going to change it more than half
right.
of the ball, I have no problem. And I know they can define the zone, like, because it's a computer and we have very, very great technology on this stuff.
We
You
sure
can
do.
dial it and say it's got to be half the baseball, it's got to be 3/4 of the baseball, it's got to be one seam, it's got to be the entire baseball. It wouldn't even kill me if they said if it's not half the baseball, we're not going to overrule the umpire, because I've seen egregious ones during the season that you just need, like, most people don't care if an ump just misses it, if it's an inch, half an inch one way or another. This is a tough game to call with the amount of movement and speed on pitches. Very,
Right.
very tough to be an umpire. Giving them an assistance instead of us making fun of them, how crappy they are, letting them see the same thing we do and making the call. I have absolutely no problem with that. And giving them the benefit of the doubt that if it's got to be a little more than one seam of the baseball. So,
Right. Computers tracking the middle of the ball. We know how big a baseball is. Well, at least usually, unless we won't go there.
yes.
We'll see. We'll see. Again, two-dimensional implementation, that they'll be practice, whatever the hell is going to happen, they'll be practicing a lot, and they'll get to know what's ringing it or not. The one thing I would love to see that will go away with this is, we see it all the time. Pitches in the heart of the zone, but the catcher dropped it or
Oh, yeah.
moved or didn't frame it or whatever,
Runner
and the umps
stealing, and all
just
of a sudden it's a ball.
yeah, I mean, those are in the zone. Those should be strikes.
Yeah.
We're pro pitcher, but I mean, those are in the zone. And then everyone's like, well, there's no well, it was in the zone, and that'll go away. So that's good to see. But to your point, I mean, it puts a real spotlight on how difficult it is. These
Yeah.
umpires that we have now, as much as we see some shit from time to time, are the greatest that the sport has ever seen by far.
By
It's not
far.
even close. It's not even close.
Going through old games in the
Right.
after the season's over makes
Right.
you appreciate just how good umpires are today, even Angel
Right.
Hernandez.
Right.
Like,
I do. I mean, right.
and
I
I
mean,
have to single it out. Like, he gets crapped on, and rightfully so. He's terrible compared to other umpires,
and
but he's
rightfully
still
so.
better than umpires that we've seen in the past. So I have your back here, Angel, a little bit.
You were crapped on, rightfully so, but I have your back.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah,
Right.
exactly. He's
Look,
got a little bit
okay,
of an
this is
attitude, which drives people crazy too.
right. These are some 50-something guys saying this, so I guess we can say it. Hopefully you'll agree. But I mean, you can see the accuracy rate, calling balls and strikes, drop with age very clearly. It's they have to do something, and if they're not going to do automated zones, look, there are crew chiefs that know the rules very well. They apply them well. They can check a pitcher's hair and all that stuff. You don't need to retire. Just maybe don't take your regular turn behind the plate.
Or take it with an ABS system, and
But
now
once you have an ABS, it
good.
doesn't matter.
Right? And
Right.
then you're free to make other great calls, like calling all the balks you want to.
Oh
Don't do
God.
that.
No.
No.
I still remember 88 or whatever, or was it 87? 88. I think it was 88, right? The
When
year
they
of the balk.
cracked it. Yeah. Bob Davidson, Balkaday.
All right, let's just not. Let's just not.
Yeah, no. Two other things that rule changes: minor position players pitching rule, little stricter about when you can have position players pitching. which I think we both agree is a good thing. We have pitchers on the team for a reason. People, I don't mind seeing a position player pitch if it's going to be something interesting. If they're throwing a knuckleball, or if it's somebody like Albert Pujols pitching, you're like, oh my God, this is so awesome. But most of the time, it's just boring and takes up a bunch of time to see somebody that's not a pitcher pitch. Probably won't have an impact on what you do or what most fans think, but it will, it got out of control. You had numbers about how many position players pitched, and how many home runs and how slow the pitches were coming in. It's getting kind of brutal. It's like every day you'd see it.
It got silly. It got to where the average fan was like, what is happening? This is a professional sport. Imagine this happening in football.
Right. All right. We're up by a ton. We're gonna put our offensive linemen in to throw. And everybody
No, I mean, it's not much different.
Right.
But it's not much different than that. You don't want your quarterback to get hurt.
Right.
You don't want your third string quarterback to get hurt.
Right. We're not talking about third string relief pitchers at the deep end of the bullpen. We're talking about some hitter who doesn't practice throwing and who also isn't going to throw as hard as he can because he doesn't want to get hurt. So I think it's good to limit it. I do like if position players are pitching, there should be a rule that they throw knuckleballs. I think every position player should have to learn how to throw a knuckleball because it's more fun. But I'm happy with this. What about the last one?
One thing on that that I would like to see. I mean, we've been spoiled with Shohei Ohtani, but I would love to see a few more two-way players.
Oh, sure.
And this makes it really tough because outside of those score restrictions, says you have to log 20 innings as a pitcher.
Yeah.
And when the hell are you going to do that? So it's a little rough. The Giants are trying to throw, was it Ronald Guzman that they're throwing out there as much as they can. But I mean, I think if you get 20 innings in a season, you're good for the rest of that season and the next. Something like that. Yeah, but I mean, 20 is a lot. I don't know. I mean, for a legitimate two-way player, what's his path to becoming a two-way pitcher?
And we have a few in college that throw really hard, that also are hitting bombs and probably deserve a shot to try it. Right. Someone being the next Shohei is really, really impossible to be because we're just lucky to have the first Shohei. But there are guys that can do it. I mean, Hunter Green actually came up as a hitter, and there was a debate about him hitting.
I don't mean skill or talent wise. I just mean someone who has enough ability both ways that he should be playing. How do you do that now?
How do you earn your 20 innings?
It's rough. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
maybe I don't understand it, but I think that's the case, so that you have to log a certain number of innings to be called a two-way player and be able to do what Shohei does, where he can come and go.
Yep, I think that's true. What else about the other rule that they've made permanent is the runner on second and extra innings rule, which we've become used to. I obviously, if you're going to be into game times, that's one of the things that will cut down on game times. Is that the way we should go? I thought it was freaking, obviously the Astros Mariners game in the playoffs last year, the 1-0 ridiculous game was fantastic. Like, did that ever get boring to anybody as it went into whatever how far did that go? 18 innings, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a different dynamic than regular season.
Right.
You
don't want to blow your bullpen, especially if we're cutting back position players. We have to make sure that you have a full bullpen to pitch these games.
Right.
I don't know. I still hear people complaining about it because it's not the baseball they knew. But I wouldn't mind.
I wouldn't mind seeing it plugged in for a later inning than the 10th. But
yeah,
I mean, I could handle 11th or 12th, but
one inning at normal, and then
after that. Something like that. But I don't mind the concept because I mean, you can, especially in this day and age where you're like maybe 13 pitchers. I mean, you could screw everything up for 2 weeks if you go after an extra inning game.
Inning game, you're dead.
So now what are both teams doing? They might throw some guy out there to wear it and skip a start, and that's not good for the pitcher. And it just becomes a problem. So
not only that, but I do think, and this is just studying pitchers and rest, the pitch clock makes pitchers work quicker, which allows them, and we don't think of it this way. We think of days rest, but there's also rest in between pitches, just like you would rest in between a set when you're lifting or something like that. They get to recover, and having less of that during the game may put more stress on pitchers. Then going deeper games, it may have effects in injuries and other stuff that we don't know of. And one reason why I've always been hesitant on the pitch clock is that, like, does it increase injuries because pitchers can't recover more? Will it increase velocity or decrease pitcher velocity because they get tired? Who knows? I don't know that we've seen that velo has decreased.
No, it's hard to imagine it would decrease injuries. It just seems like it might mildly increase them. I mean, you're going to see guys rushing pitches. That can't be good.
Yeah, so. We'll find out. But overall, and this is something we talked about off camera too. We talk about fans and, hey, this isn't the game. I'm not watching anymore because we've just tinkered with the game and now it's a game that I never wanted to watch, or that wasn't what I was watching when I was a kid. One of the things that we do, like we talk about pitch clocks, and the game doesn't involve clocks, and that's the beauty of it. There was always a rule, or at least for a number of years, that that you had a pitch within a certain number of seconds. So there has been a clock. Just we haven't enforced that rule. This pitch clock is allowing you to enforce this rule that has been on the book. So this has been the game you grew up with. It's just we've had this number out there that nobody's enforced, just like the fraternizing rule where you're not supposed to talk to another player while you're in uniform and all that. That happens.
Change the damn rule. Just
get rid of the rule if you don't want.
Don't let him. Don't put umpires in positions where they're picking and choosing what they enforce and how they enforce it. Just take the damn rule out if you're not going to enforce it.
That's right. That's easy.
The pitch clock, I saw an old Spalding's baseball guide or whatever, when they spelled baseball as 2 words. It was from 1913. It was like rules from the 1880s or whatever, but it had a damn pitch clock.
Yeah, right.
But what were you going to do in 1880 or 1913 or whatever?
You have to look at the sundial if it moved like 1 degree.
Yeah. So I mean, it was kind of ridiculous, but the concept's been there,
right? And all we're doing is enforcing it.
Right. I like the concept. Me personally, I think it's a little fast. I'm just saying, that's just my opinion.
I don't disagree, but it also makes the game move, which may bring, like, again, I think not only will it bring short attention span folks or people like. Yes, there's a beauty of the game going slow, and it's, you can talk to your friends, you grab a beer, you can do whatever, but that's you and that's me. I'll watch any length of game and I'll hang out and drink and do all that stuff. There are other people that bring kids to games that have choices about video games, move quick, other things move quick. It's awesome to be a baseball fan and appreciate that, but there's also a group of people that are like, I don't have time for this, or this game is so boring. And now we're hopefully bringing new people into it that we all can enjoy this.
Right. It's well documented. I love Mark Canna. Okay. So everybody come at me or whatever. It's like, it's all documented. I love Mark Canna. However, first pitch is bounced last year, steps out, adjusting the batting glove. Like you didn't do anything, that stuff had to go. I'm glad that's gone. But I mean, there's no time to step out, and you can have your arguments later and you can bitch about it later, but do not step out of the box. We're seeing so many 2-strike fouls where the guys walking, like they step. There's old habits die so hard.
Yeah.
And yes, it's going to continue to shrink as guys keep getting burned, but it's still going to happen.
Well, give an example of some of the rules that have changed over time that are not the game that we grew up with. And you're sitting there going like, oh, that was a rule, or they have tinkered with the rules over time. The number of balls for a walk has changed. We were talking about foul balls being counted as a strike.
Right. When I was a kid, there was a hitter who was that hit like 424 in 1901, or like, damn, that guy was a great hitter. And they were great hitters back then. It's like foul balls weren't strikes. Tony Gwynn would have hit 500. And we're talking like into like 1903, I think, that they put that in the American League. I mean, so in 1902, a foul ball wasn't a strike. It's a long time ago. They fiddled with the strike zone a number of times.
Right.
It was shoulders to knees until 1950. Shoulders to knees.
Yeah, that would be exciting if they did that. Like, can you imagine?
Right. Right. Imagine that. And imagine from the mounds that were unregulated. Yeah. I mean, there were 20-inch mounds at times in some parks. So you got a 20-inch mound and you can drop it at shoulder length. It's kind of funny that keep the ball down was something that got drilled into your head when you were a kid so much. It's like it took so long for them to appreciate what a high fastball, how hard it was to hit. But anyway, I digress.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Like that is one of those things that is probably the biggest poor teaching thing that we had gone through is like keep the ball down.
Like, no.
And then, right. Well, and then you would be like, this is more youth stuff, but hey, just put the ball in play, hit the ball on the ground as a hitter, but you're telling pitchers to get ground balls. So it can't be both, right? You can't say as a pitcher, a ground ball's good, but as a hitter, a ground ball's good. Why? What help me with that? That doesn't make any sense. So this is where analytics and statistics and everything and smart folks in the game have helped make the game a more logical game and make it make a lot more sense than coaching stuff. I've been through stuff with injury. This pitch causes injuries because one guy got injured. Well, we haven't run the analytics on every pitcher that has thrown a splitter, for example, and how many of them have gotten injured. What stress does it really put on the arm? Now we can measure all that stuff. So we can say, no, it's really not that more injured. So analytics has done wonders for the game.
Right. I think we were talking also about baseball purism. There's no such thing. Baseball has never changed. Oh my God, it changes all the time. I mean, as recently as 1960, which probably sounds like a long time to some of your listeners, but it's really not that long ago. They'd play the season, and the two winners of each league would play. There were no playoffs. There's just a World Series. There were 8 teams in a league. Look at it now. Here's something I looked up yesterday because I thought, damn, this probably happened. How many times did Ted Williams face Warren Spahn? Well, it had to 0.
Yeah, different. Yep.
He never faced him. That's like crazy. But when would you? Well, I'd have to look. He probably faced him in an All-Star game, but
yeah, I mean,
but not in a regular season or a postseason.
We've changed mound heights fairly recently, where you have stats that you can't match up very well with current stats.
Right, 1969, which again is not as long ago as it makes it seem. I mean, they whacked 5 inches off the mound, and it wasn't just that. That's when they really said, okay, enough with the spitballs. You're not allowed to do this. The zone changed. They added 4 teams, and like everything changed. Like 1968 to 1969, scoring went up 19%, walks went up 22%, home runs went up 31%.
Wow.
From 68 to 69.
That's incredible.
They've done that. Yeah, they've monkeyed with this before. Oh, we didn't talk about DA. I mean the DH.
Right.
That's a big deal.
So you're talking about all these rules and, obviously recently doing away with enforcing this sticky stuff, foreign substance stuff more. But we've had rule changes throughout the history of baseball. This is a major package, a major change, but is it for the better? To me, and I think the most fans feedback I've seen overall, grades are about a B+ on the rules, and I've seen negatives. The only negatives come up really when we're talking about strikeouts on a pitch clock violation.
Right. The optics.
Yeah. It's just a shitty optic. I mean, no doubt.
There's one thing that's, I know Jason Starks talked about it a lot, but it's still, I don't know that it's really set in with most folks. I mean, last year, each team played 20 games against teams in the other league during the regular season. 20. It's 46 this year.
Yep.
That is humongous. Yeah, and you're going to see, and you play every team once a year, right?
Yep.
Didn't I see that?
Yeah.
Not necessarily home and road, but you play them somewhere every year. So, I mean, that you're starting to see, I mean, almost to the point where the leagues aren't, I mean, if they keep going down this road,
you don't need leagues.
Will kind of wash out.
Big thing, right?
Yeah. Anyway, that's going to be a big deal, and it does change a lot. There's I know from working with guys that they're like, we haven't seen this guy in 3 years, and now we're going to see him. I mean, I'm going to see him a lot. The relievers are like, I'm probably going to pitch against this guy.
Yeah.
All new guys, their teams don't have any history against him. They're like, well, we don't need it.
Right. And now it's
we know how you pitch, we know how he hits, and that's how the system's built. So.
Well, I, for one, am looking forward to what the impact will be during the season. I like new things. These are good, new, shiny things for the most part. I think it'll increase enjoyment of the game. I know everybody's going to complain at first. Everybody complains about everything at first. You change the font on any social media network and people lose their minds. So change does stuff to people. This is significant change with a sport they love. Give it some time, and I think appreciate some of these new challenges and the new competition that takes place as you're using this pitch clock to
Right.
your advantage, both as a hitter and a pitcher, and maybe more steals, and then you're cheering like people like that. Like that's action. So maybe instead of complaining about change, we can look at some of the bright sides of it. And I'm ready for it. I know you're ready for it. I hope everybody out there is ready.